I think I became a philosopher when I was 4. I didn't know the word, but I already knew my brain worked different. My mind ran deep, my heart too open. I felt everything, like I didn't come with a filter. That's also when I started flying from Florida to Massachusetts to see my Vavo and my Tias and Tios. My first flight alone was when I was 5, and from that moment on, I basically grew up in the sky. My mom would dress me up, dock sliders, nice shirt, hair perfect. My aunt would walk me onto the plane, kiss me goodbye, and then it was just me, my curiosity, and the crew. The flight attendants always spoiled me. It felt like I was part of a secret club. They'd see me coming down the jetway and their faces would light up. They'd pin those little plastic wings on my shirt, a badge of honor I'd wear for the rest of the day. They'd hand me decks of cards, not just one but sometimes 2, with the airline's logo on the back. They'd lean in, their voices low and conspiratorial, and talk to me like I was one of them, asking if I was ready for the big flight and sharing secrets about the best clouds for spotting shapes. Sometimes if the flight wasn't full, they'd whisper to my mom and bump me to first class. The seats felt like giant thrones, and they'd bring me warm nuts in a little ceramic dish. But the real prize was the jump seat. Sitting there during takeoff was like being strapped to a rocket. Even better was the cockpit. Before 9/11, the rules were different. I got to visit before, during, or after the flight, standing in the doorway of a place that felt like a command center for the future. I'd tell the pilots, with all the seriousness a kid can muster, that I wanted to be one too. They'd smile, a knowing, gentle smile, and let me wear their heavy, gold-braided caps. The hat would slip down over my eyes, smelling faintly of coffee and adventure. I'd sit there, completely still, just staring at the endless sea of lights and switches. Each one was a mystery, a button that could do anything. They weren't just buttons, they were stars in my own private galaxy, and for a moment, I was the captain of it all. Whenever I stepped onto a Delta flight, it was the sound that hit me first. The music would be playing softly, that iconic song, Adeiemus. That angelic, otherworldly hum filled the entire cabin, wrapping everything and everyone in a blanket of calm. It was the official anthem of departure, a sound that promised adventure. It sounded like flying before the wheels even left the ground, a perfect overture to the journey ahead. The air inside was always cold, a crisp, manufactured chill that made you want to pull on a sweater. The lights were kept low, creating long shadows down the aisles, and the faint, clean smell of jet fuel still lingered, a perfume for travelers. That song, mixed with the cold air and dim light, was the mood of travel itself, a potent cocktail of mystery, wonder, and a little ache for the place you were leaving behind. I loved every single part of it. The low, constant hum of the cabin fans, the satisfying metal click of the overhead seatbelt sign, the sudden, powerful blast of jetway air on my face when we flew north for Christmas, a frigid welcome home. My pre-flight ritual was sacred. I'd buy candy, usually a long rope of Twizzlers, at the airport newsstand before boarding. Then I'd grab a stack of magazines, Entertainment Tonight, Mad, People, Teen Bop, my supplies for the voyage. Back then, they fed us on every flight. Not just a bag of pretzels, but real meals, served on trays. Sometimes, on the shorter flights, they'd even give out lunchboxes. I'd peel back the hot aluminum foil with the focus of a surgeon, the steam rising up to meet me. It didn't matter what it was, rubbery chicken or mystery pasta. To me, it was fine dining at 30,000 feet. I used to fly into TF Green in Rhode Island all the time to visit family. When I was little, it maybe had 3 gates, tops. It was an old airport, stinky carpets, yellow walls from years of cigarette smoke. It wasn't glamorous, not like the sprawling, sterile hubs of today. It felt more like a well-worn bus station for the sky, a place with history etched into its very structure. The air hung heavy, a permanent cocktail of industrial cleaner failing to mask decades of grime. You could smell it the second you walked off the plane. Back then, people smoked everywhere. On the planes, in the terminals, even at the gates while waiting to board. A blue-gray haze was just a permanent feature of the decor. I remember seeing rows of people puffing away, the tips of their cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the dim terminal light. It was a different world, one that's almost impossible to imagine now. The air was thick and stale, but to me, that was the smell of travel. Jet fuel and cigarette smoke. I still associate the two. That sharp chemical tang of kerosene mixed with the acrid scent of tobacco meant an adventure was beginning. It was the official perfume of leaving one world and arriving in another. Even now, a faint whiff of jet fuel on a cold day can transport me right back to that jetway. I flew alone my whole childhood, from 5 until 17. I was a seasoned pro at being an unaccompanied minor. The ticket agents and flight attendants didn't actually know me, but they acted like they did because I had that big button on my chest with my name on it. It was my badge of honor, a sign that I was on a special mission. I knew the whole routine by heart. Stay with the gate agent, board first, and don't talk to strangers unless they were wearing a uniform. "Hi, Kevin," they'd say like I was a regular. "Ready for your flight?" It made me feel important, like part of their world. I wasn't just a kid being shipped off. I was a fellow traveler, a colleague in the business of getting from here to there. I'd nod seriously, clutching my boarding pass like it was a state secret. TF Green was small, quiet, kind of worn down, but it had its charm. I knew every inch of it, the sound of the escalators, the hum of the vending machines, the echo of footsteps down the hallway. I knew which water fountain was coldest, and which chairs didn't wobble. It was my kingdom between flights, a familiar layover land where I was the sole, tiny ruler. And at the end of that hallway, my Vavo, or my Tias, would be waiting near the gate, waving the second they saw me coming off the jetway with my little carry-on. Their faces would light up, and a crowd of them would be pressed against the barrier. I felt proud walking toward them, like a kid who'd just conquered the sky. I'd walk a little taller, trying to look cool and unfazed by my solo journey across the country. Those arrivals were the best part, the warm, loving payoff to a journey through smoke and steel. It was coming home. At Christmas, the airports felt different, almost magical. It was like the whole building was humming with a special kind of energy. Lights were strung up everywhere, twinkling reds and greens, with garland draped over the walls and check-in counters. The usual airport announcements were punctuated by Christmas music playing softly over the speakers. You'd see people all bundled up in their thickest coats and scarves, holding steaming coffee cups, juggling armfuls of presents. I remember the annual ritual of packing gifts into my suitcase, a careful game of Tetris hoping they wouldn't break in transit. I'd wrap my sweaters around the fragile boxes, whispering a little prayer to the baggage handlers to be gentle. It was a small act of faith, sending those presents into the belly of the plane, trusting they'd make it to the other side. Of course, that faith wasn't always rewarded. My bags got lost a bunch of times, becoming a running joke in my family. But one Christmas they lost the one with all the presents, the one I had packed so carefully. I remember standing in the stark, fluorescent light of the lost bag office with my cousin while he tried to describe our missing suitcase to the tired-looking agent. He told the lady it was tweed. I had no clue what that meant, but he said it with such authority. I just nodded along, picturing some kind of fancy, old-fashioned fabric. The agent typed away, her face giving nothing away, and I felt a pit in my stomach. The presents were gone. The bags didn't show up until after Christmas, so I had to wear someone else's clothes for a couple of days. It felt strange, like being in a costume. The sleeves were too long, the jeans too loose. It was a constant, slightly uncomfortable reminder that a part of our holiday was still missing, circling on a carousel somewhere, or sitting in a forgotten corner of another airport. The flights themselves were their own little worlds, filled with a random assortment of humanity. One time I was shaking my leg because I was nervous, a habit I couldn't control when I was anxious, and the man next to me, without even looking at me, just grunted and told me to stop. The sharpness in his voice made me freeze. I felt so small, so embarrassed, and I spent the rest of the flight trying to stay perfectly still. But then there were other times. Another time, sitting in first class, a woman next to me, Indian I think, started talking to me. She told me about living in Detroit her whole life, how she'd watched it change. She said the city felt empty now, that there was no rush hour anymore since the car companies left. "It's a silent city," she said, and her voice was heavy with a history I couldn't possibly grasp. I didn't fully understand the economics or the politics of it, but I felt the sadness in her voice. It was a profound, unexpected connection, a shared moment of melancholy with a stranger at 30,000 feet. I was a quiet kid, so I noticed everything. The specific recycled smell of the cabin air, the cool vibrating feeling of the window against my arm, the faint greasy handprint on the glass from whoever sat there before me, a ghost of a previous journey. I traced the outline of my own dull reflection in the plexiglass, watching my face distort with the curve of the window. I even loved when I got a whole row to myself on night flights. It felt like winning the lottery. With the dim cabin lights on, and everyone else sleeping around me, it was like having my own private observation deck. I'd stretch out, just me in the vast darkness outside, watching the runway glow fade beneath us as we climbed into the sky. The taxi lights, the runway signs, the steady, powerful whine of the engines. It was my lullaby, the soundtrack to my favorite kind of adventure. I memorized the language of the crew. Flight attendants, cross-check, and prepare for all call. Those words were sacred to me. The chime tones for the pilots and flight attendants talking, the rhythm of it all. It was music. I watched the gate agents typing fast, juggling phones, calling boarding groups, the ground crew throwing bags, walking the wings, guiding the planes with orange wands, the tugs crawling across the ramp. Every movement felt alive to me. Later, when I started working at Delta, it hit me. I was finally backstage again, only this time I had the badge. There was the time I got stranded overnight in DC because of snow. They paired me up with a flight attendant, a sweet black woman who made me feel completely safe. She let me eat chips in bed, drink a little soda, play Go Fish. When I got scared, she told me a bedtime story. She said, "Don't tell anyone about the chips." I never did. And the roast beef story, how could I forget? I was in the bulkhead aisle feeling all grown up and thought I was putting mayo on my sandwich. Took a huge bite and gagged. Told the flight attendant it was spoiled. She brought me another one, same thing. Then she laughed and said, "Oh honey, that's not mayo, that's horseradish." I'll never forget that burn. When I was about 7 or 8, my dad bought me a transistor radio from Radio Shack. I wasn't supposed to use it on the plane, but I did anyway. I tuned into air traffic control, real pilots, real towers, real call signs. It wasn't static, it was clear. I'd sit there quietly, headphones on, listening to the sky talk to itself while everyone else just read magazines. And before seatback screens, I'd flip through the route maps in the airline magazines, tracing our path with my finger, matching the clouds outside to where I thought we were. I was basically flying from my seat. By 15, I'd found the airport smoking lounges. I'd sit with adults, talk, listen, watch. Airports taught me how to read people, how to feel at ease anywhere on Earth. Those flights raised me. They taught me patience, trust, kindness, and perception, that what you see isn't always what's real. The sky was my classroom, the crew, my teachers, and every time I hear Adeiemus or smell jet fuel, something in me exhales. That's when I know I'm home. If you like this short story, click like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can hear the latest story from Meology 815.